back of the rim. Garnett on the slam. Oh, using Curry way downtown. Oh, what a shot from Curry.
What's up, NBA fans? Dom2K on the mic, and I'm pretty sure you heard the news yesterday that, well, it's not really news, it's more Michael Jordan saying again that he would choose Kobe Bryant over LeBron. This isn't anything new because a few years back, Michael Jordan said the same thing, and just like yesterday, it was based around rings. He always says Kobe Bryant has 5 rings, and LeBron has how many ever rings he has at the time, and in this case it's 3, so Michael says there's just something about 5 that's better than 3. And I wanted to make a video talking about my thoughts about it because people asked me what I was thinking, and I have a lot to say about the whole ring argument and everything that people respond to this because of course this always sets the sports world on fire. Everybody talks about it, everybody has different opinions, and I just kind of want to touch bases on a lot of things that I've seen. So first things first, I'm very curious about Michael Jordan himself. Michael obviously has the opinion that Kobe Bryant is the closest player to him since he retired, and a lot of people feel this way. The play styles are the same, the mannerisms are the same, and Kobe Bryant really modeled his game after Michael Jordan, so it's not really a crazy thing to think. But I'm curious because Michael has been mighty defensive about the whole Kobe Bryant and LeBron thing. He's always said things about how Kobe Bryant is the only player who's done the amount of work to be compared to Michael, and when LeBron formed the super team in Miami, Michael Jordan was caught saying in an interview that he would have never called Larry or Magic to play with them, so really the underlying comment there is that he didn't think it was such a competitive move. So there's just a lot of things that Michael says where you can tell that he sees himself above LeBron, and at least he says he sees Kobe Bryant above LeBron, but I'm more curious to hear what Michael actually thinks beyond the ring count, because even though rings do matter, rings are definitely not the only thing that makes a player better, and that's pretty obvious because of the amount of players that have won a championship ring. Now, maybe Michael feels like because he's still widely accepted as the greatest of all time, he doesn't really need to explain himself, but as a fan of the game, I would love his insight past championship rings because when you just say that, it's a bad argument, and it allows a lot of people who don't really critically think, I guess you could say, it allows them to argue against it. So when people aren't critically thinking, the first person they always bring up in this argument is Robert Horry, and that's what I want to talk about next. I actually debated doing one of my shadow round videos on this, but honestly the argument isn't really long enough, so I think I can do it here. Michael Jordan says 5 is better than 3, people immediately respond with 7 is better than 6, but that's no better of an argument than Michael is making because both are bad arguments. When you talk about championship rings, I think you can say that those count when you're talking about players that are being considered the greatest of all time, or you're talking about top tier superstar players. Rings really do weigh heavier there. So when you look at Robert Horry, I'm not going to take anything away from him being in the right place at the right time because he stepped up pretty much every time his team needed him to hit that big shot. That's what he's known for. He's known for hitting the clutch shot that the team needs to win, and he did it for the Spurs, he did it for the Lakers, he's done it multiple times in his career. But the difference is Robert Horry is not a player that was ever a superstar or somebody that led a championship team. So I'm not saying that his rings don't count, I'm just saying you can't really make that argument and say, okay, well if Michael is saying that 5 is better than 3, then 7 is better than 6. I get that it's the counter argument, but I'm seeing that too frequently because when you're talking about ring count, you're talking about players that are kind of seen eye to eye. So to qualify that, I think a good thing to talk about is the greatest of all time list. So when you talk about pretty much the top 10 players in NBA history, you're not just talking about them talent wise, but you're talking about their resume as well. So you look at players like Karl Malone and Tracy McGrady who never won a championship ring, there's no way you can tell me that if they had won 2 or 3 rings in their career that they wouldn't be ranked much higher than they are right now. And that's how players move up and down the ranks. You look at their MVPs, you look at their personal statistics, you look at all the awards they won, the championships, and then you evaluate their personal talent. And the reason I'm bringing up the greatest of all time list is because I'm starting to see this movement where people are trying to devalue championship rings. They're trying to say that rings really only matter for team accomplishments and you can't really evaluate a player by the amount of rings he has because that takes being in the right place at the right time, it takes your teammates stepping up, and all of that is true. But on this issue, you really need to come to the halfway point because you can't just write championship rings off as a team accomplishment because on that team, some players are infinitely more valuable than the others. So if we take Michael Jordan for example, yes, he had a great supporting cast for all his 6 championship rings. Scottie Pippen was the perfect Robin player, and then they added Dennis Rodman and you had Tony Kukoc. Yes, that was a good team, so I'm not going to take that away from them, but I'm also not going to take that away from Michael as an accomplishment because he was by far the most important piece of that team. So when we talk about the greatest of all time list, I'm not going to look at Michael and say, yeah, he had 6 championships, but that's more of a team accomplishment. No, yeah, it's a team accomplishment, but those 6 rings count heavy because Michael did a hell of a lot for those rings. So this leads right into the Bill Russell argument, because either before or after they bring up Robert Horry, they immediately say 11 is better than 6, and there they can carry more weight because Bill Russell, unlike Robert Horry, is actually ranked on the greatest of all time list. As a matter of fact, when you take resume and talent, he is probably on most top 10s. And then when you take into account Bill Russell has 5 MVPs to go with that, people say, oh well, 11 rings and 5 MVPs, by Michael's logic, he has to be better than Michael then, right? And again, this is where I'm just gonna need you to critically think, okay? I don't think I need to explain the era that Bill Russell played in. Now, I'm not disrespecting Bill Russell, because as a matter of fact, he does make my greatest of all time list, but like I said earlier, when you're talking about that list, it's a mixture of talent and it's a mixture of what a player accomplished. For anybody that knows anything about the 60s and the type of players that there were and the amount of teams that there were and how many rounds were in the playoffs, I don't think there's anybody out there that doesn't think you could put Michael Jordan in the 60s and have him end up with probably the same amount of rings, if not more. And it's a completely unfair hindrance on Bill Russell's legacy because he came in the era before players were lifting weights, at a time when players were still smoking cigarettes right after the game, before all the doctors and dietitians and the training schedules and all that kind of stuff that players like Michael Jordan had access to and players today have even more access to. It's just one of those unfair hindrances. But I have a whole series covering the case for greatest of all time that I'm going to continue, and Bill Russell is going to be on that. So I would just say for now, if you don't agree with me, go do your own research about the 60s, read Bill Simmons' book of basketball. There's plenty that you can learn and you'll really understand, if you don't already understand what you should, why Michael Jordan does rank above him and why you can't really use that 11-6 argument. Now, with all that being said, Michael Jordan's argument for Kobe over LeBron just using rings is as bad as everything else I've already talked about, and I'm gonna love reading these comments because I'm pretty sure somebody's gonna kill me and call me a Michael Jordan lover before they get through the whole video, and that's just gonna be my way of telling who actually watched the video and who didn't. But to the whole Kobe Bryant and LeBron thing, whether you choose to admit it or not, or whoever you're a fan of, that is a very close argument, and it's closer than anybody wants it to be. I'm not gonna answer that question here of who's the greatest, but I am gonna say there's an entire mixture of things. So of course people jump straight to LeBron James's finals record, and he is 3 out of 8, and that's a pretty ugly finals record for somebody gunning for the greatest of all time. But by that same token, you can say, okay, but LeBron James also does have what, 4 or 5 MVPs? Kobe Bryant only won 1 in his entire career. But then on the flip side of that, you can argue that player for player, Kobe Bryant is a bit more skilled than LeBron. He had a more fine-tuned offensive game, his footwork was beautiful, he had plenty of go-to moves, and LeBron James relied a lot on his athletic gifts, the speed, the strength, and pretty much everything we see today. But then you can say on the flip side of that, that because of the type of player LeBron was, he could do more than Kobe, and pretty much all of his statistics are going to be better than Kobe's, except maybe scoring. It just kind of depends on what happens at the end of LeBron's career. But pretty much everything else, the percentages, almost everything else on paper looks better for LeBron James. But then you can also look at mentality, which I know a lot of people hate to hear, but that does count, because you can look and say, well, Kobe Bryant would have never allowed anything to happen like what happened in 2011 to the Heat, where that was a winnable finals for Miami. They were supposed to beat Dallas. LeBron James had an 8-point finals game, and it was a pretty crucial game too, and really you can say that was the worst final series LeBron James has ever had. And if he would have had a regular series, they would have gone on to 3-peat, because they would have beat Dallas, the Thunder, and then the Spurs. And then you can look at Kobe and say, well damn, what about him in the finals? Because in 2004 he played absolutely terrible, and a lot of people favorited LA to beat the Detroit Pistons, and Kobe, that might have been his worst final series that he had. And then people would start discussing, well, what did each player do when they had a bad supporting cast? LeBron James went to the finals with probably the second worst roster in NBA Finals history. Meanwhile, Kobe didn't get out of the first round without a good player next to him. And then people would say, well, but LeBron plays in the East and Kobe played in the West. You can't do that in the West. So if you can't tell, I'm just kind of spitballing ideas here between Kobe and LeBron, because I have a whole thing I'm going to do for them, and I'm not going to do it right now. So don't want to say who's the greatest, and I'll go obviously way more in depth when I actually do. But right now I was just kind of giving you the type of things that I would like to see from Michael Jordan if he were actually going to talk about why he would pick Kobe Bryant over LeBron. Because just like saying something like Robert Horry's or Bill Russell's rings makes him better than Jordan, saying that Kobe Bryant's rings makes him better than LeBron, that's really no better. So from the widely accepted greatest player in NBA history, I would just love to hear the insight of, you watched both of their careers, you watched Kobe and you watched LeBron. What about their careers makes you rank them the way you do? And just, you know, the point of this video was to try to make the ring argument a little bit better to understand, and when you do use it and when you don't use it. It's not a trump card, but it does play heavily into player rankings. And the two things I would like to stop seeing is, I would love to stop seeing that player A is better than player B because of the amount of rings he has. And I would also love to stop seeing, oh, we're not using rings in this argument because they're a team accomplishment. Neither one of those are right, so just come to the middle and I think you can make a good argument for whatever player you're talking about. That being said, that's all I got for you guys today. I really want to read the comments on this and I want to see what you guys think about the ring argument, and you can even talk about who you think is better and why, because I want to see what some of y'all have to say. I know a lot of people are emotional and passionate over this one, so I'm definitely going to be in the comment sections lurking, so leave your comments below, hit the like button and subscribe if you enjoyed, hit the bell next to my name if you want notifications on my videos. I'm Dom2K and I'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks for watching.